Buongiorno and welcome to a visit to the Rotonda, a visit which is going to be somehow different from the usual visit that you or the tourist would do, or friends, in a casual or official way. This is a visit into a private life of a villa and my and my brothers and sisters' life within the Rotonda. A life that we have spent for the last 60 and more years. We were not born at the Rotonda, we were born in Venice. And we would come here every summer from the mid of June until the mid of October, when we will go back to Venice for schooling. The original entrance, as you can see, was this hump, this raised portion here, which would lead into the terrace on which the villa sits. Was the direct entrance between the Cardo and the villa per se. And the entrance surrounded, however, by the various beautiful fields of corn, mulberry trees, vines, and other agricultural products. Products that were part of the self-sustainability of the place. Even today, we have a barn with the cows and all the agricultural, I would say, occupants plus farmers. And the products are not only used by us, but also by the farmers and the people that works on the place. Now, today, we don't enter here any longer, but we are entering where we are going to go from now on to the next step of our description. In other words, the entrance as it's being used today. This is the present entrance to the villa, unlike the one that we have seen before, historically speaking. This roadway was built in the 1750s, and to bring the horse and carriages to the building. As you know, the horse and carriages were around the 1750 period used for domestic transportation. And obviously the retaining walls represent this deep incision in the landscape, which may be a form of an anathema to the building. But it gives a sense of approach very domestic, very simple, not unlike the Baroque entrances of the Roman and Florentine villas. The gateway, even the gateway, represents this relationship between the human intervention and the natural setting, with this wonderful festoon of what we call it vite americana, which changes colors in the fall, and it becomes a bright red. The entrance was designed by Vincenzo Muttoni, who was a contemporary of Vincenzo Scamozzi and of Bertotti Scamozzi and of Lord Burlington. In fact, we may recognize some of these architectural features in the English neoclassical architecture of the 18th century. And through this entrance, therefore, that now we have the approach to the house, two-dimensional first, and then is going to blossom and explode into its four-dimensional total architectural value. Okay, we would arrive here from Venice by car or by horse and carriage. And it was always so wonderful and emotional to come to approach to the gateway and come through and have this gateway opened with a very, very typical sound metal, which was for us a sort of foreboding. What it happens that we came in with a carriage, and then I remember to go through, slowly move close to the villa, and behind me I could hear this gate closing and squeaking a little bit with this sound and being locked. And I knew, and we all knew, that for 3 months we would be locked in, away from the fun of the world, away from our friends, away from what we thought it was the beautiful world that we had to abandon for 3 months. It was obviously a child, I would say, feelings, because today, in fact, I would rather prefer to hear that gate close behind me and stay inside rather than go outside where the world doesn't offer me that sort of dreaming that this villa gives me. All right, now we are walking up the entrance through this alley, which was, of course, built in the 1750s when the gateway was done. And we are surrounded by a retaining wall on my right, and on my left is the barn, which is still used today as part of the agrarian activities. We have this, you can see those windows there. Those are the windows, ventilation windows for the barns downstairs. There was this wonderful smell of manure and hay, which we can still sort of test it today. Now, this was also the place where we used to have vegetables, and we would have also the ornamental flowers. We don't have ornamental flowers gardens like we have it in England. The gardens, the flowers were integral part of the landscape, the manicured landscape of the place. Geraniums, roses, we see rosemary and other, I would say, kitchen green stuff for the use of the domestic needs. Now here I'm walking and I approach the platform, and where the villa sits in the most serene and perfect way. And we are now coming into the space in which the entire area explodes in its 360 degrees universe as a theater, as Palladio calls it in his 4 books. The theater is surrounded by the entire horizon, all the way beyond those retaining walls, and soften the edge by the vegetation. Well, in many of the very warm afternoons, we would move from the heat of the place in the background into this boschetto, which used to be called the Bosco delle Galline, because the chickens were around here. My father had a wonderful, always this utopian idea that being in the country, not in the suburban house, that my father would like to have around him chickens, peacocks, animals that they had to deal with the country life. And so we had the chicken here, so il boschetto delle galline. And he's always very cool. And in this area, we would play bocce. There was a little bocce field, and we would be surrounded this place and throw the balls and spend the afternoon in the coolness with iced tea, and always in the shadow of the great villa in the background. And we will spend wonderful afternoon in this area. You see some of the trees that they are mostly chestnuts. The chestnuts are indigenous of this place, and we would collect the chestnut and then have big battles with the chestnuts, but they're not eatable ones. They're really the wild one. I don't know what type, what specimen they are. My father moved in when he got married, and he started immediately a family. And when my first sister was born several years ago, my father planted these 2 trees on my left-hand side, which are the pini ombrellati, which are still in existence since 1924. They have been sort of a specimen of a horticultural miracle, I don't know, because there is no earth underneath. And somehow here they are, and the camera may point at them, giving these wonderful shades, which underneath we would play, and giving also framing the Hercules, where we as children would climb on it and sort of play a fist fight with his very, very strong physical components. In the back of me, you see this flat place again, and underneath we have the wine cellar. The surface is made of concrete because it was built during the First World War by the British hospital contingency who took over the villa. And there are wonderful documents about seeing the trucks being parked right on the stop. But basically all of this landscape, the contours that we see here, are contours which been changed by my father in the 1920s. For example, the road, these pathways that we see, he built them because he wanted to bring the car up from the gates all the way into the villa. We still have a vintage 1500 cylinders Fiat bought in 1961, and it has become almost a relic as part of the life of the villa. And it's here where we are going. We were greeting people, where we would arrive, depart from here, from this space, where we would play soccer, where we would have supper at night under the linden tree in the background, because that probably was the coolest place in the evening, and then we would watch the firmament on top of us. So we were always constantly, I would say, in front of nature in its entirety, in its cosmological way, with constantly bombarded and aware of the details and of the making of the house. Behind me, I have the southwest portico, and it's in this area where we would spend our afternoons, the cool parts of the day, because it's always under the shade, under these wonderful linden trees. And it's here where we studied. We also had the visitors. I remember Bernard Berenson really sitting here and talking about arts with my mother especially. He had a sort of a soft heart for my mother, and he would talk about arts and with us. And it's here where both my brothers and myself, we got really involved with the subtleties of the architecture of this house, and we started to learn what the elements were that made this architecture so enduring and so fantastic. We would, I at the time, I'm talking about being 10, 12, 14, I would take a sketchbook and really sketch and draw the various details of the buildings, under the tutorship of many of our good friends architects, people's names that you well recognize, and the discussion here were a little bit like what we have learned in school. This was a sort of very enlightened discussion and arguments that we would be taken under interest on our part. Now, moving from here, We are still on top of the barrel-vault wine cellar, which is underneath here, which is still in operation. You don't know the fantastic smell that comes in September when you crush the grapes. It really oozes up, and almost you can get drunk by smelling the fresh grapes. And a big retaining wall holds the barrel vault, and underneath here we have this big jump, which is obviously a part of the general construction of this area. And this was the orangery, remember? The woods were not here when the house was built. These woods are part of the 19th century. The orangery was always a very important part of the villa, and so important that we have the goat at that end, and the goat is the coat of arms of the Capra family. And the orangery has been destroyed during the war, the Second World War, by the Germans first and by the Allied troops and the other ones. And we are in the process now to rebuild it, because we would like to bring it back to the original conditions. In the meantime, we have some imposters, some chickens, but they give us very good broth and eggs. And at the end is the entrance to the orangery with two statues. The one on the left is Virtue, the one on the right is Fortune. Virtue being negotium, and fortune being, fortune being negotium, and virtue being otium. As I say, the woods, which are wonderful trees, the elm trees and linden trees and chestnuts and so forth, were all built in, they were planted in the 1800s. We may imagine to have everything here tabula rasa and see the wonderful sweep of the fields all the way background to the hills. The hills that you can see slightly when you turn your head, and you're going to see them over there in the background, and those hills being the Berici, which crown the entire region, which is called the Valle del Silenzio. This region is where the farm existed. We still have about 130 acres of the original land, and is still occupied by farmers and by cultivations. And we can see a farmhouse over there, and underneath, when over this sort of screen, this vertical screen that we see, it is repeated all over the places around this area. We have the farmhouse built by Vincenzo Scamozzi in 1601, which is one of the few extant farmhouses still in operation since the beginning of this, let's call it, institution. I take you now, and we walk slowly toward the northeast end of this platform. And while we are walking there, we're going to experience something that is, in my mind, very, very important for understanding the origin of the location of this building. In fact, we are walking over, in my opinion, of a very, very hot archaeological site. Why archaeological? Well, because my speculation is that the building is not located because it was selected to be located for real estate reasons. It's located in this position because originally there were two existing buildings, farm buildings, which were bought by Monsignor Paolo Almerigo for 22,000 piastre. Piastre was at that time the currency in Vicenza. It's under this area, therefore, that I'm quite sure, we could find Roman ruins, because entire alongside the ridge parallel to the Cardo, there were Roman fortifications. The Cardo was a Roman military road. And I'm quite sure once I leave the University of Virginia, I will entertain to do some digging to prove that at least we have these Roman artifacts, at least then to leave for others to speculate on it. We're moving now toward the wall, the separation, the proscenium, as I call it, between what lies beyond our realm. It reminds me a little bit, and I hope I'm not blaspheming about, the terraces of Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright, in which when you reach the parapet of the terraces, you are really in a sort of a hard edge between this fantastic expanse of nature and the building, the tangible building, the measurable aspect of the building and the unmeasurable dimension of the surroundings. So we have the same feelings here. We have because we can pace our distances with our physical endurance, but once we are gone to the edge, nothing is measurable any longer, and we are then at the, I would call it, at the mercy of speculation and also of emotions. We have obviously the expansion of the city, which slowly reaches the outskirts of Padua, which lies about 40 kilometers from here. But again, you can see the Cardo framed by the poplars trees, which were all cut during the Second World War by the Germans, who had built a huge big trench, which was then filled to protect the city from the invasion of the Allies' tanks. Now, it's from this area, I would say, that you can then also enjoy this tremendous expansion of your eyes and of your feelings, of your sentiments, when you look over on my left, and you see the hills, the Berigi Hills with their wonderful clear vegetation, the vegetation that is then transformed slowly into architectural motifs, a little bit like we have it at the University of Virginia, from the Blue Ridge Mountains through the trees into finally the columns. It's a sort of metamorphosis. And if we understand that between this dialogue, this constant dialogue between the nature that surrounds the building and building itself, then we understand why this sort of architecture endures through the centuries. We are now starting the processional entrance into the building from this platform, which is the mediation between the universe which surrounds the structure and the structure itself. And we are going to be engaged with the parts which make the building, and they connect somehow, they anchor the building to the ground. We're going to climb very slowly the scalone, or the main staircase, one of the four which surround the building on the four sides, flanked by the sperone, which is in my background. And it's here where the steps, which are very unpleasant to negotiate today, especially for the elderly and for the handicaps, something that my brothers and I are thinking to do in order to be able to carry inside, especially the handicaps. But once we are on top in this pronaos or portico, flanked by the 6 columns, we are really on the sort of a neutral space, on the poché area between the outside and the inside. And it is in this place here which we, first of all, we have the first absolute understanding of the measure and of the dimension of the building. And also, we have the first clear understanding between the relationship of the building with its side through the views frame alongside the columns, which then become the real decorative elements of this, the structure, not only of the Villa Capra, but also of the other villas. Palladio was always extremely scared about over-decorating the walls, because obviously they would ruin the harmony of the proportions of the golden section, I would say, of the rooms. But it's in here, for example, I remember Marcel Breuer measuring this space, and it's when I learned to do it myself. And even today, I space this one here all the time because I forget the dimension. But in measuring there, and you have about 6 steps, so they are 18 feet in depth, then this leads you inside of the building in this cavernous, fabulous, unbelievably bizarre and ambiguous space. Now we are moving into the core of the building, which is called really this around the dome room, which explains now why the building is called La Rotonda, and being square outside, being round inside. The dome room is really the apotheosis of the building, in which all the decorative elements are part of the description, not only of the importance of the narrative as understood during that time, but also the importance of the self-indulgence on the part of the Capra family, and to represent through the frescoes by Dorigny the importance in the society of the time. Diameter of this room is the same diameter of the oculus of the Pantheon in Rome, and hence we can see, we can get a certain idea of what this, the dimension of the Pantheons would be. Not only, but you have to remember that also the diameter of this building, of the hall here, of the Rotonda, is exactly the diameter outside diameter of the Tempietto by Bramante in Rome. A Tempietto which Palladio saw and he admired tremendously by including it into the classical temple buildings in his 4 books of architecture. When one occupies the center of the Rotonda, of the dome room, one has full command of the 4 entrances. The first one that we see, this one here, the northeast entrance, is the northwest entrance, excuse me, is in fact the most important one, because it's the ceremonial, and it is also the most, I would say, enjoyable, in that there is a variety of components, architectonic and landscape components, which enliven almost the emotion that occurs from the chapel in the background, all the way through the columns, through the door into the room. This is a southwest entrance. It is probably the most private entrance, I would say, because it overlooks the Bosco, which was built in the 19th century, and is part of really the everyday life of the family in history and also presently. It's in that loggia, for example, that we would gather in September and October because it's the warmest one, and it was the most protected from the natural elements. The southeast loggia is, the loggia overlooks the work on the farms. It's the most agrarian, if we can call it, loggia. It also overlooks the pianura, the flatlands that extend all the way into Padua and beyond, almost to the shores of the Veneto region. It's here where really we see in winter, in the falls and in the spring, the activities of the land. And it gives really this impression of the relationship between the otium and negotium. The northeast loggia is the one that offers the broadest view of all. It's the one, obviously, that is related to the original entrance from the Cardo. And by looking out, we can really space our eyes into the infinitum. Usually, with a very clear day, on the horizon, we see the Prealps with the wonderful white caps, tops. We can see it today because it's rather hazy. We see instead the sprawling of the city of Vicenza toward the southeast. And when I grew up here, there wasn't one house in view. The only thing that we could see it faintly in the distances, like in the Chirico painting, the trains going by. And that was a sort, for me, a psychological connection between the outer world and the life within the villa. We have concluded thus 360 degrees of an experience about the relationship between the villa, the center of the villa, with its surroundings. As Palladio again said, the villa sits in the center of its own theater. We've seen the four views, and this one here, I would say now recaptured this entire universal value of the building within its own universe, is the relationship between the sacred and the profane, between light and shadows, between soft materials and hard materials, and between the tangible and the eternal. And like a good Roman theater, it is between the reality, it's where we stand now, and the illusion, which is always in front of us. I would like to take now and talk a little bit about the iconography of this building, which has been mostly neglected. We're talking about the architecture, obviously, is the most important thing. But the iconography is really what narrates now, it supports the entire ideology and the meaning of this entire structure within its own realm. It's an iconography that's very complex in its own description, because it divides between the element of nature and the element of man. We are now right at the center of the room. It could be the axis, the vertical axis that connects ideologically the floor with the oculus, and therefore with the sky. It's around this axis that the entire universe, not only of the Rotonda, but the universe that surrounds the Rotonda, pivots. And it is the fascination of the decorative elements of the cupola that trigger all sorts of speculations and interpretation about its meaning. What are the elements of the universe? Here we start with Earth. Earth is extremely, I would say, voluptuous, and because it represents in its physical terms what the land around the building represents, very rich and very productive, and is production of the entire self-sustainability of the agrarian proudness of the setting. Then the next one is going to be fire. Fire is something that we need to have in order to survive. Fire is, like in modern architecture, is the fireplace, is the cradle of any domestic life, and therefore fire is also represented by the woods that we have around, and the fireplaces that we see in the various rooms as we'll see it in the future. The next one is water. The entire surroundings of the Villa Rotonda has water. We have water wells, we have water streams in the fields, we have the river Bacchiglione. Water is a most important element for the survival of the production of the land. And therefore is one of the most important and paramount elements of the setting. And finally, we have air. And air is represented in around the Villa and the Rotonda, the space, this fantastic, unlimited space with its all changes of density and intensity of light and of color, which gives really the sense of the universal presence of this fantastic element that we call air. The other element of the universe are the four continents that have been known at the time. Here we see Europe with a unicorn, which represents virtue and purity and almost innocence. Flanked is Europe by another element of the universe represented by the intellect, by the mind of the human. I believe there may be the sort of the mind of man and the ability of express himself as a human. But it's one of the elements that we will have to study very carefully to give a proper interpretation. The next continent, one of the four, is America, represented with a horse, and the horse is really somehow the power of the physical component that works the ground, works the earth to create its own products. And here we have one of the four components of the human intellect is science. And we see that figure that holds a bird in its hands. And the bird is really representing the trust and the attempt of a mind to conquer the unknown elements of the universe. The third continent that we're seeing is Asia, and we see a very voluptuous lady that may be representing Venice with very, very strong brocade and wonderful dresses. Venice, which obviously her fortune depended on the open routes with Asia. And in the background, we see the elephant, because also ivory and the various, the natural components of the fauna of Asia was an integral part of the commerce of Venice. Now we go with Venice. We have another element of the human mind, it's a theology. A theology we see with a book in the background, which represents really literature, oratory, and the entire ability to the human mind to be able to communicate and to express him or herself. And then finally, we have the other continent, which is Africa. And Africa was only known at the time with the northern part of Africa. And we know through the Roman history that there are wonderful elements again from the African continent, which the lion then is also representing somehow by, I would say, by extension, the lions of St. Mark's, because St. Mark's was African. It was from Egypt, it was from Alexandria. And therefore, you see again in this iconography, we have this faint, but somehow clear connection between what is could be theological and also, or I would say more mythological and secular. And then finally, the next part of the mind is philosophy. And philosophy, as we know, was one of the major disciplines which were used and studied at the University of Padua. From the oculus in the center of the cupola, right underneath on the center of the room, creating this fantastic hypothetical vertical axis which connects Earth with the sky. We have this most fantastic mask, what we call it mascherone, representing Faun. The Faun, the sort of the satirical god of the bucolic world. In fact, it is surrounded by grapes and other products of the earth. And from it, we see the 8 rays moving outwardly, which represent the 4 diagonals of the house, which are the cardinal points, and the 4 axes of the building, the central axis, which represent really the 4 entrances that we have seen beforehand. And this is really, in my opinion, the sort of the apotheosis of this room, which is really connecting the sacred as seen in an agrarian world and the profane, which represents really the physicality of the earth and of the matter which surrounds this building. The windows in the Villa Rotonda, as basically every villa by Palladius, are the most important decorative elements in the architecture. The decoration is offered by what we see through the opening. And in the case of the Rotonda, we have 20 windows on the piano nobile, each one of which has a different iconography. In this particular case, which is the northwest window of the north room, we have in the far background the Monteberico Monastery, and then we see the pine trees planted by my father for my sister, first sister, and then we have the statues, which gives a sort of a human dimension to the entire iconography. What we have seen in the dome, where the natural element are in a certain way interpreted by the painters, now it's here really the elements of nature that present themselves to us in the most glorious and, on the other hand, a very bucolic way. Before we move to the other rooms, I wanted to say how much I remember of this room and what was going on or went on in the many years that we have been living in this house. This room for me was really a sort of a classroom. I learned so much, not only by the erudites that came in and out from this house all these years. I learned from, and I still learn it today, from the visitors that come and be so taken, surprised by the magnificence and by the impressiveness of this room. And I'm also learning from the students when they come here and they sketch this place and they learn about proportion and so forth. And that is something that will never leave my memory. And as I said before, is where I learned a great deal. And I feel really to be part of sort of a blessed person to have spent so many years in this particular place. Palladio, in his 4 books, he tells us that the house is a small city as a city is a big house. I always thought about this, about the Rotonda, in that this room, the round room, acts in the building as it would be a piazza. This is really the common room, the public space, the public domain. And there are also the private space. In other words, the rooms that we're going to visit, they would be the houses in a city. And therefore, now we're going to go into one of these houses, and we're going to talk about, very briefly, about these various rooms. And I'm going to show you the first room, which we used it as a dining room. In fact, we have some remnants here of this particular area. I'm standing right now at the south corner. We are right at the diagonal. This is the cosmical, I would say, position of the house, the south corner. Rooms like these were heavily decorated through the centuries. The ceiling shows us the original decoration done during Palladio's lifetime and immediately after his death, with frescoes from the school of Paolo Veronese and stuccos of craftsmen from Vicenza and the Veneto. And we need also to look very carefully about the entire volume of the space, which has decoration on top of the chimney. The chimney is Palladian, designed by Palladio. We find the chimneys also in his 4 books, and Alessandro Vittoria and his helpers, and some later sculptor, the decoration on top of it. Doors and what we call it the sopraporte, the upper doors, are also of the 16th and the 17th century. But before we go to the next house, as I like to call it, is on the eastern corner, we come by again into the public space. And this public space, as we see it now, lit from the sky, from the oculus, and that natural light, it really gives the tremendous vigor and I say beauty in this particular room. Now here we could ring a bell, and we enter into a next private space. This was used by my family as the living room. We would have a nice card table here. We would play cards. There was another desk there belonged to my mother, where she would write her letters. And so this was a really very, very used room by the family. And I have a little bit, I must confess, homesickness about this room, because we would stay until midnight, 1 o'clock, sipping a nice drink while we're playing cards in the fall. A little bit cool, but still wonderfully cozy, I would say. And something very funny, this was also a favorite place where the pipistrelli, or the bats, would come and scare the hell out of my sisters, because they were afraid they would land on their hair. Now, I move to a smaller room, which is always flanking the larger room. And here we see that these probably were the rooms where the family would spend their intimate life. Probably these were also the temporary bedrooms, if in fact the family would spend a night and so forth. Decorated, as we can see, with the so-called grotteschi. The grotteschi are the early decorative components that the villas would use after the discovery of the frescoes in the Domus Aurea in Rome, the house of Nero. Now you come with me, and I take you now again into a sort, let's call it a little street, this one here, a little alley with a piazza again on our side, freezing cold in winter and beautifully cool in the hot summer with its usual light. And we come into now, I ring the bell, and the door opens in front of me. We go into another private, very private, intimate room with the same grotesque on the ceiling, and the grotesque here with a different sort of pattern, different also sort of colors, beautiful colors, which are reminiscent to the frescoes discovered in Pompeii. However, the discovery of the frescoes of Pompeii came much later than the actual execution of these frescoes. And now we come to the next room, the third room, or the north room. The walls show all sorts of maps that belong to, that have prints and handmade prints of holdings of the Valmarana family in the Veneto. Old holdings, don't worry about, they're not ours any longer. And the ceiling shows us this wonderful sort of Barockish, heavy-handed decoration, which was very much indigenous of that period in Vicenza. We have to remember the Baroque came to the Veneto very, very, very late. It's almost like a memory of the Baroque that we have seen. Over the doors, we have in there the portrait of Palladio. It is interesting because at that time, instead of having a plaque with the signature of the architect, there would be, in fact, the portrait of the architect with the particular building the architect just finished to build. It dates probably around the middle of the 1600s, so this is not a painting of the same period of Palladio. It's suggestive of the fact that really we see the so-called the direct relationship between the creator of the villa and the villa itself. Let's go to our final room. So 4 corners, 4 bigger room, 4 smaller room. We exit this house. We're moving into almost, let's call it, little piazzetta, which is flanking the major piazza. And we enter, ring the bell again, and we enter in this room, which is not completed yet because it's going under a restoration process. We have the one element here, which is very important, is the floor. And the floor is made of cotto or terracotta, and that were also painted, so that it must have been a very, very vivid and vibrant sort of surface. Same decorations on the walls. In fact, this is probably the only room that shows us a little bit what the walls could have been in the past, except for the color. The color is still, I believe, the colors that my father put almost 75 or 80 years ago. So it's a decoration a little bit, or a testimony of the taste of that time. We have the portrait, I believe done around 1780, of Battista Capra. Battista Capra was the daughter of Gabriele Capra, the owner of the Rotonda at that time. And apparently, she is the one, in marrying Benedetto Valmarana, she brought in her dowry this villa. And that is the reason why from the villa falls into the Valmarana families in 1722. From the central room, there are 4 accesses, one of which is this one here, to the 4 stairs. The stairs were used strictly for intimate, I would say, and private purposes, were not stairs used either by guests or by official personalities. And therefore, even today, these stairs are really strictly for personal and domestic use. When we were children, we were not allowed, mostly, to come into this main room because my father and mother were very sort of protective of the furniture and the floor because we have always had muddy shoes. You know that we were 6, plus some others, maybe some friends. And so it was a no off-limit area. And we always used the stairs to go up and down, to go up to our bedrooms or down in the lower area. And it was a wonderful place where we would run, and we would also measure the time. How long would it take for us to go all the way up, and how fast would be to come down, jumping 3 or 4 steps at a time. Remember, the stairs are on a type of corkscrew, so it takes some very important training to do this Olympic feat. In these stairs, you can see their domestic purpose. This niche here, where there is this ugly light, used to be the toilet rooms. There are 3 of them in the stairs, and they are all in the 4 stairs. Here is where the guests and the household, but not us, would use for their personal purposes. So we coming down, I told you, running down, and we would really lean against the wall, and then we would come down. There used to be a bell here made of a shell, and the bell would be ringing, and they would call us for meals, and we would come down and fast usually, and then being congregated on the ground level. You can imagine 22 meters in height, doing it in 3 seconds when we run down, and here we are finally on the ground level. The ground level which was used, and still it's been used for domestic and service purposes. This is the plan of this ground level is exactly identical of the plan of the piano nobile. So we have a large room and a small room, and then the central space. And through this area is where we would also play in the fall and the winter. We were allowed to do everything in here because there is always the connection with the outside. And in this sotto portico, we call under the portico, we would have lunch or suppers here. It's always very nice and cool, and beautiful views from the outside. So therefore, the connection with the outside is constantly integrated with the house. The windows, as we will see from the room, the windows are fairly high, so there is no view from the inside to the outside, but it's a constant physical connection to the outside. And here, finally, we are in the heart, I would say, really the ideological heart of the building. This is, for me, probably the best of all the floors in this villa. It's really the pure architecture as envisioned by Palladio, free of any decorative form, only shape and structure. There is this fabulous, fantastic brick system that holds the floor. No beams, only vaulting. Therefore, also the integrity of the material, which shows the clarity of the intention of the architect, and also the purpose of the room that was always for sort of the distribution of the various activities of the family. And now I'm talking this in really mentioning the past, not my family. Here is where we were allowed, as I say, to run around with the bicycles and with tricycles. And It was a very comfortable and also climatically very pleasant space, always cool. So much that even this furniture that you see, which dates back to around the middle of the 1700s, has always been here. You can see it was cut really to be to be set alongside the curved wall. So even the sound here has this wonderful echoing. So I think really that this is the most beautiful and emotionally captivating aspect of the building. Obviously, the tourists prefer to see some Gaudi decorative elements. But this, for us architects, and even for us children, this was really the room because we could use it. Okay? And by doing walking around, we can even exit again into the open space, where then we could see nature again in its full bloom and its full richness. Well, here we are, back where we started from. I hope you had a fairly good trip around the Rotonda. And if you didn't understand certain parts that I explained, I apologize for that. But I would like to really make it very clear that it's a very emotional and personal point of view. The script was not prepared, and everything that I say came off my mind, my experience, and my memories. So that this really is a very genuine experience that you had with with me walking around the villa. It's also very emotional for me and my brothers, because we have a very big responsibility in maintaining and continuing the operation and the physical maintenance of the structure with a tremendous amount of, I would say, time, energy, and also economical energy. So I hope that you did enjoy it very much. We will certainly try to maintain and to respect what we have been entrusted by our fathers and by our antenati, by forebearers. And as the inscription under the pediment, it says, if for any chance this generation or other generation would not be able to continue the operation of the villa as it was intended for, then it's time to move away and give the responsibility to someone else. I hope that this, for us and for our children, grandchildren, is not going to be the case. In saying so, I bid you farewell, arrivederci, and I hope to see you at the Rotonda very soon.